The Southern California sun bathed the pristine streets of Oakwood Estates in a warm, golden glow. Manicured lawns stretched out before grand houses, each one a testament to success and affluence. Among these symbols of the American dream stood Hannah Reeves's home, a stunning two-story Mediterranean-style villa with terracotta roof tiles and a meticulously landscaped garden. Hannah, a rising star in the tech industry, had worked tirelessly to build this life for herself and her son, Ethan. At 35, she was the youngest executive at Innovate Tech, a cutting-edge software company that was revolutionizing the way people interacted with technology. Her days were filled with high-stakes meetings, groundbreaking projects, and the constant pressure to stay ahead in the ever-evolving tech landscape. But for all her professional accomplishments, Hannah's greatest pride was her 5-year-old son, Ethan. With his mop of unruly brown curls and bright green eyes that sparkled with curiosity, Ethan was the center of Hannah's world. Every moment she spent away from him at work was a moment she longed to get back. As Hannah's sleek black Tesla pulled into the driveway that balmy Tuesday evening, she felt the familiar mix of excitement to see Ethan and guilt for having been gone all day. She gathered her laptop bag and a small, colorfully wrapped package, a surprise gift for Ethan, before making her way to the front door. The moment she stepped inside, the cool, air-conditioned interior enveloped her, providing instant relief from the sweltering heat outside. "Ethan, Mommy's home," she called out, her voice echoing through the marble-floored entryway. Instead of the usual pitter-patter of excited little feet, she was met with silence. Frowning slightly, Hannah made her way towards the kitchen, her heels clicking against the polished floor. As she rounded the corner, she found Lydia, their nanny, preparing dinner. Lydia had been with them for 3 years now, ever since Ethan had started walking. With her kind blue eyes, graying hair always neatly tied back, and a seemingly endless well of patience, Lydia had been a godsend for Hannah. She was more than just a nanny. She was practically family. "Good evening, Hannah," Lydia greeted with a warm smile. "How was your day?" "Busy as always," Hannah replied, setting her things down on the kitchen island. "Where's my little man?" A flicker of something, concern, frustration, passed over Lydia's face before it settled back into its usual pleasant expression. "He's in his room. He's been a bit moody today." Hannah's brow furrowed. Ethan had always been a cheerful child, quick to laugh and slow to anger. "Moody? That doesn't sound like him. Is he feeling all right?" Lydia shrugged, turning back to the vegetables she was chopping. "I'm sure it's nothing. You know how children can be sometimes. Perhaps he's just tired." Nodding absently, Hannah made her way upstairs, her excitement to see Ethan now tinged with worry. As she approached his room, she could hear the faint sound of sniffling coming from behind the closed door. "Ethan?" she called softly, knocking gently. "It's Mommy. Can I come in, sweetheart?" There was a moment of silence before a small voice replied. "Okay." Hannah pushed open the door to find Ethan sitting on his bed, hugging his favorite stuffed elephant to his chest. His eyes were red-rimmed, and his cheeks were stained with dried tears. In an instant, Hannah was by his side, gathering him into her arms. "Oh, baby, what's wrong? Are you not feeling well?" Ethan buried his face in her shoulder, his small body trembling slightly. "I don't like Lydia anymore," he mumbled into her blouse. Hannah pulled back slightly, surprised. "What do you mean, sweetie? Did something happen?" Ethan's lower lip quivered as he looked up at her. "She's mean to me, Mommy. She says scary things when you're not here." A chill ran down Hannah's spine. She struggled to reconcile the image of kind, grandmotherly Lydia with what Ethan was saying. "What kind of scary things, Ethan? Can you tell me?" But Ethan just shook his head, fresh tears welling up in his eyes. "I don't want to talk about it. Please don't make me go with her anymore." Hannah's mind raced. Could this be a misunderstanding? A phase? Or was there something more sinister at play? She hugged Ethan close, feeling his little heart beating rapidly against her chest. "It's okay, baby. You don't have to talk about it right now," she soothed, running her hand through his curls. "How about we go downstairs and have some dinner? I brought you a surprise." Ethan's eyes lit up slightly at the mention of a surprise, and he nodded, wiping his nose with the back of his hand. As they made their way downstairs, Hannah's mind was in turmoil. She had always prided herself on her ability to read people, to make sound judgments. How could she have missed something like this? And more importantly, what was she going to do about it? Dinner that night was a tense affair. Lydia moved about the kitchen with her usual efficiency, but Hannah couldn't help noticing how Ethan seemed to shrink into himself whenever the nanny came near. He picked at his food, only brightening when Hannah presented him with the surprise, a new set of dinosaur figurines he had been eyeing at the toy store. After Lydia left for the night, Hannah spent extra time with Ethan, reading him stories and reassuring him that everything would be okay. As she tucked him into bed, she made a silent promise to get to the bottom of whatever was going on. Later that night, as Hannah sat in her home office reviewing reports, her mind kept drifting back to Ethan's words. She found herself opening a new browser window and typing nanny cameras into the search bar. The results made her pause. Was she really considering spying on Lydia, the woman who had been a part of their lives for years? But as she thought of Ethan's tear-stained face and frightened eyes, she knew she had to do something. She couldn't ignore her son's distress, no matter how implausible it seemed. With a heavy heart and a conflicted mind, Hannah placed an order for a set of hidden cameras. As she clicked "Confirm Purchase," she couldn't shake the feeling that she was about to uncover something that would change their lives forever. The next few days passed in a blur of work commitments and stolen moments with Ethan. Hannah found herself hyper-aware of every interaction between her son and Lydia, searching for any sign of the meanness Ethan had mentioned. But Lydia remained as kind and attentive as ever, making Hannah wonder if she was overreacting. When the package containing the hidden cameras arrived, Hannah felt a mix of relief and apprehension. That night, after both Ethan and Lydia had gone to bed, she carefully installed the tiny devices around Ethan's room and the main living areas. As she synced them to her phone, she tried to convince herself that she was doing the right thing. Little did Hannah know that these small, inconspicuous devices were about to shatter the perfect suburban life she had worked so hard to build. The weight of anticipation hung heavy in Hannah's chest as she sat in her car, parked in the driveway of her beautiful home. It had been 5 days since she had installed the hidden cameras, and she hadn't allowed herself to check the footage yet. She wanted to give it enough time to capture a full picture of what was happening when she wasn't around. Now, as the setting sun painted the sky in hues of orange and pink, Hannah knew she couldn't put it off any longer. With trembling fingers, she opened the app on her phone that connected to the cameras. She took a deep breath, steeling herself for what she might see. The first few videos seemed innocuous enough. There was Lydia tidying up Ethan's room, folding his clothes with care and straightening his toy box. Hannah watched as Ethan played with his Legos, built pillow forts, and did his homework under Lydia's supervision. Everything looked normal, and for a moment Hannah felt a surge of relief. Maybe she had overreacted after all. But then, as she scrolled through the footage, something caught her eye. It was a video from 2 days ago, around mid-afternoon. Lydia was in Ethan's room, watching as the boy colored in his dinosaur coloring book. Suddenly, Lydia's posture changed. Her shoulders tensed, and her usually warm expression hardened into something Hannah had never seen before. Hannah's heart began to race as she turned up the volume, straining to hear what was being said. Lydia's voice, usually so kind and gentle, had taken on a cold, almost menacing tone. "You're being awfully noisy today, Ethan," Lydia said, her words dripping with barely concealed irritation. "You know what happens to little boys who can't stay quiet, don't you?" Hannah watched in horror as Ethan's small body stiffened, his crayon dropping from his hand. "I'm sorry, Miss Lydia," he whispered, his voice trembling. "I'll be quiet." "You'd better be," Lydia replied, leaning in close. "Or else the monsters under your bed might just decide to come out and play." Ethan's eyes widened with fear, and he nodded frantically, pulling his knees up to his chest and making himself as small as possible. Hannah felt sick to her stomach. How could Lydia, the woman she had trusted with her most precious treasure, say such things to a 5-year-old child? She fast-forwarded through more footage, her heart sinking with each new revelation. There was Lydia, hiding Ethan's favorite stuffed elephant and telling him he could only have it back if he behaved perfectly. There she was again, whispering something in Ethan's ear that made him burst into tears, only to sweetly comfort him when Hannah came home early from work. But the worst was yet to come. In a video from just yesterday, Hannah watched as Ethan accidentally spilled his juice during snack time. Lydia's reaction was immediate and terrifying. She grabbed Ethan's arm, her fingers digging into his soft skin, and yanked him close. "You clumsy, stupid child," she hissed, her face contorted with anger. "Do you have any idea how much trouble you cause? How much easier my life would be without you?" Ethan's cry of pain and fear echoed through the phone's speakers, and Hannah felt as though her heart was being ripped from her chest. She had seen enough. Tears streaming down her face, Hannah burst out of the car and ran into the house. She found Ethan in the living room playing quietly with his toys while Lydia prepared dinner in the kitchen. Without a word, Hannah scooped Ethan into her arms, holding him tightly as though she could somehow erase all the hurt he had endured. "Mommy?" Ethan's confused voice was muffled against her shoulder. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong anymore, baby," Hannah whispered fiercely. "Mommy's here now, and I promise, no one is ever going to hurt you again." She carried Ethan upstairs to his room, her mind racing with what she needed to do next. As she set him down on his bed, she knelt in front of him, looking into his eyes. "Ethan, sweetheart, I need you to be brave for me, okay? Can you tell me about the things Lydia does that scare you?" Ethan's lower lip trembled, but he nodded slowly. She tells me there are monsters under my bed, and sometimes she hides my toys and says I can't have them back unless I'm good. But I try to be good, Mommy. I really do. Hannah's heart shattered at the desperation in her son's voice. "Oh, baby, I know you do. You're such a good boy, and none of this is your fault. I'm so sorry I didn't believe you sooner." She pulled him into another hug, her mind made up. She couldn't allow Lydia to remain in their home for another minute. "Ethan, I want you to stay here and play with your toys for a little while, okay? Mommy needs to talk to Lydia, and then we're going to have a special night. Just the two of us. How does that sound?" Ethan's eyes lit up slightly at the prospect of time alone with his mom. "Can we have pizza and watch a movie?" "Absolutely," Hannah promised, forcing a smile onto her face. "Anything you want." As she closed Ethan's door behind her, Hannah took a deep breath, steeling herself for the confrontation to come. She made her way downstairs, her footsteps heavy with the weight of what she had discovered. Lydia looked up as Hannah entered the kitchen, a warm smile on her face that now seemed like a grotesque mask. "Oh, Hannah, you're home early. I was just about to start on the chicken for dinner." "That won't be necessary, Lydia," Hannah said, her voice cold and controlled. "I need you to leave, now." Lydia's smile faltered, confusion clouding her features. "I'm sorry? I don't understand." "I think you do," Hannah replied, her anger building with each word. "I know what you've been doing to Ethan. The threats, the manipulation, the emotional abuse. It stops now." The color drained from Lydia's face, but she quickly composed herself. "Hannah, I don't know what you're talking about. Ethan and I have a wonderful relationship. He must have misunderstood something." "Save it," Hannah cut her off, her voice sharp. "I have video evidence, Lydia. I saw everything. How could you? He's just a child." Lydia's demeanor changed in an instant. The kindly grandmother facade melted away, replaced by a cold, hard expression that Hannah had never seen before. "You have no idea what it's like," Lydia hissed. "Day in and day out, catering to the whims of a spoiled brat while his mother is too busy climbing the corporate ladder to care." Hannah recoiled as if she'd been slapped. "Get out," she whispered, her voice shaking with fury. "Get out of my house right now, or I swear I'll call the police." For a moment, it looked like Lydia might argue further, but something in Hannah's eyes must have convinced her it was futile. Without another word, she gathered her things and walked out the front door, leaving behind a deafening silence. As the door clicked shut, Hannah sagged against the kitchen counter, her legs suddenly unable to support her. The magnitude of what had happened, of what she had allowed to happen, crashed over her like a tidal wave. How could she have been so blind? How could she have failed to protect her son, the one person in this world she loved more than life itself? Tears streamed down her face as she battled with her guilt and anger. But she knew she couldn't fall apart now. Ethan needed her to be strong, to make this right. Wiping her eyes, Hannah took a deep breath and picked up her phone. She dialed the number for Ethan's pediatrician, scheduling an emergency appointment for the next day. Then she called her assistant at work, clearing her schedule for the rest of the week. Her son needed her, and nothing else mattered. With shaky hands, she ordered Ethan's favorite pizza and queued up his beloved dinosaur movie. As she climbed the stairs to fetch him for their impromptu movie night, Hannah made a silent vow. She would make this up to Ethan. She would heal the hurt that had been inflicted on him, and she would never, ever let anyone harm her precious boy again. As she opened Ethan's door and saw his small face light up at her presence, Hannah felt a fierce love and protectiveness wash over her. They had a long road ahead, but they would walk it together, and somehow, some way, they would find their way back to happiness. The days that followed Lydia's departure were a whirlwind of emotions for Hannah and Ethan. Hannah had taken an extended leave from work, determined to be there for her son every step of the way as they navigated this difficult time. The house, once a symbol of her success, now felt tainted by the memories of what had transpired within its walls. Hannah's first priority was Ethan's well-being. The day after Lydia left, she took him to see Dr. Martinez, his pediatrician. As they sat in the cheerfully decorated waiting room, Hannah couldn't help but notice how tightly Ethan clung to her hand, his eyes darting nervously around the room. It was a stark reminder of the invisible scars Lydia had left on her son's psyche. Dr. Martinez, a kind-faced woman with salt and pepper hair, listened intently as Hannah recounted what had happened, her voice breaking several times as she described the abuse Ethan had endured. Throughout the examination, the doctor was gentle and patient, speaking softly to Ethan and explaining everything she was doing. "Physically, Ethan seems to be okay," Dr. Martinez said after the examination, her eyes filled with concern. "But emotional trauma can be just as damaging, if not more so. I'd strongly recommend that Ethan sees a child psychologist to help him process what's happened." Hannah nodded, feeling a mix of relief that Ethan wasn't physically hurt and anxiety about the road ahead. "Of course, whatever he needs. Do you have someone you'd recommend?" As they left the doctor's office with a referral to a highly regarded child psychologist, Hannah felt a glimmer of hope. They had taken the first step towards healing. The next hurdle came in the form of Hannah's own guilt and self-recrimination. As she tucked Ethan into bed that night, reading him his favorite story about a brave little knight who defeats a dragon, she couldn't shake the feeling that she had failed him. "Ethan," she said softly after finishing the story, "Mommy wants to tell you something important. What happened with Lydia? It wasn't your fault. Not at all. And I'm so sorry that I didn't realize what was happening sooner." Ethan looked up at her with his big green eyes, a wisdom beyond his years reflected in them. "It's okay, Mommy. You didn't know, and you made her go away." Hannah felt tears welling up in her eyes. She pulled Ethan close, marveling at his capacity for forgiveness. "That's right, baby. She's gone, and she's never coming back. I promise I'll always listen to you and believe you from now on." As Ethan drifted off to sleep, Hannah sat by his bedside, watching the gentle rise and fall of his chest. She made a silent vow to herself and to her son. She would do whatever it took to help him heal, to rebuild the trust that had been shattered, and to create a safe, loving environment where Ethan could thrive. The following weeks were a roller coaster of emotions. Hannah threw herself into researching childhood trauma and how to help Ethan cope. She rearranged her work schedule, switching to part-time hours and working mostly from home. Her colleagues were understanding, but she could sense the unspoken questions, the whispers about why the usually driven Hannah Reeves was suddenly scaling back. But Hannah didn't care about office gossip or career advancement anymore. Her priorities had shifted dramatically. Every moment she spent with Ethan, every small smile or laugh she coaxed from him, felt like a victory. They started seeing Dr. Levine, the child psychologist, twice a week. At first, Ethan was reluctant to open up, but Dr. Levine's gentle approach and use of play therapy slowly began to draw him out. Hannah sat in on some sessions, learning techniques to help Ethan feel safe and express his emotions. One particularly breakthrough moment came during a therapy session about a month after Lydia's departure. Dr. Levine had asked Ethan to draw a picture of his feelings. Hannah watched, her heart aching, as Ethan drew a small stick figure surrounded by dark, scribbled lines. "Can you tell me about your drawing, Ethan?" Dr. Levine asked gently. Ethan hesitated, then pointed to the stick figure. "That's me," he said softly. "And the dark stuff. That's how I felt when Lydia was mean, like I was trapped and scared." Hannah felt tears pricking her eyes, but she stayed silent, letting Ethan express himself. "But look," Ethan continued, picking up a yellow crayon. He drew a bright sun in the corner of the paper. "That's Mommy. She made the dark go away." In that moment, Hannah felt a surge of love and determination so strong it almost overwhelmed her. They still had a long way to go, but they were making progress. Together, they would chase away the darkness and find their way back to the light. As they left Dr. Levine's office that day, Hannah scooped Ethan up into her arms, holding him close. "I love you so much, little man," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Ethan wrapped his arms around her neck, burying his face in her shoulder. "I love you too, Mommy," he replied. "You're my superhero." Hannah's heart swelled at his words. She might not wear a cape or have superpowers, but for Ethan, she would move mountains. As they walked to the car, hand in hand, Hannah felt a renewed sense of purpose. The road ahead might be challenging, but with love, patience, and perseverance, they would emerge stronger than ever. The sun was setting as they drove home, casting a warm, golden glow over the suburban landscape. Hannah glanced at Ethan in the rearview mirror, watching as he gazed out the window, his expression thoughtful. In that moment, she made a decision. It was time for a fresh start, a chance to create new, happy memories untainted by the shadows of the past. "Hey, Ethan," she said, an idea forming in her mind. "How would you feel about us taking a little vacation? Just you and me, somewhere fun and exciting?" Ethan's eyes lit up, a spark of joy that Hannah hadn't seen in far too long. "Really? Can we go to the beach and build sandcastles?" Hannah felt a smile spread across her face, mirroring her son's excitement. "Absolutely. We can go wherever you want, do whatever you like. It'll be our special adventure." As they continued their drive home, chatting excitedly about their upcoming trip, Hannah felt a weight lifting from her shoulders. They still had healing to do, trust to rebuild, but they were on the right path. With each passing day, each small victory, they were reclaiming their lives and their happiness. The perfect suburban life Hannah had once prized now seemed hollow in comparison to the deep, unbreakable bond she was forging with her son. She realized that true success wasn't measured in promotions or material possessions, but in the love and trust between a parent and child. As they pulled into their driveway, the house looming before them, Hannah made another silent promise. This house, once tainted by painful memories, would become a haven of love and safety for Ethan. They would fill it with laughter, with joy, with the warmth of family. Together, they would confront the truth of what had happened, but they wouldn't let it define them. Instead, they would use it as a stepping stone to build a stronger, more beautiful future. Hannah and Ethan, mother and son, facing the world side by side, an unbreakable team. The weeks following Lydia's departure unfolded like the petals of a delicate flower, each day bringing new challenges and small triumphs for Hannah and Ethan. The sprawling suburban house that had once felt like a stage set for their perfect life now seemed too big, too empty, echoing with the ghosts of what had transpired within its walls. Hannah threw herself into creating a nurturing environment for Ethan, determined to fill every corner of their home with love and positivity. She redecorated his room, letting him choose the colors and themes. Gone were the muted, sophisticated tones she had once insisted upon. Now, Ethan's walls were adorned with a mural of a lush jungle, complete with friendly dinosaurs peeking out from behind vibrant foliage. "Look, Mommy," Ethan exclaimed one Saturday afternoon, pointing to a small green dinosaur hiding behind a fern. "That one looks just like Mr. Scales." He hugged his beloved stuffed triceratops close, a toy that had become his constant companion since Lydia's departure. Hannah smiled, running her hand through Ethan's unruly curls. "You're right, sweetie. Maybe Mr. Scales has some jungle cousins he wants to visit." As she watched Ethan happily arranging his toy dinosaurs in front of the mural, Hannah felt a bittersweet pang in her chest. These moments of pure, childish joy were becoming more frequent, but they were still punctuated by periods of anxiety and fear. Just the other night, she had been jolted awake by Ethan's terrified screams. She had rushed to his room to find him tangled in his sheets, his small body shaking with sobs. "The monsters, Mommy," he had whimpered as she gathered him into her arms. "They were trying to get me." Hannah had held him close, murmuring soothing words and rubbing his back until his sobs subsided into hiccups. "There are no monsters here, baby," she had whispered fiercely. "Mommy won't let anything hurt you. Ever." As Ethan had drifted back to sleep in her arms, Hannah had felt a renewed surge of determination. She would do whatever it took to chase away the shadows that Lydia had left in her wake. The healing process was not just confined to the walls of their home. Hannah had made the difficult decision to be open about what had happened, starting with her closest friends and family. She knew the whispers and speculation would be inevitable in their tight-knit community, and she wanted to control the narrative, to protect Ethan from prying eyes and wagging tongues. Her parents had been devastated when she told them, her mother dissolving into tears while her father paced the room, his face a mask of fury and guilt. "We should have seen something," he had muttered, running a hand through his graying hair. "We were there so often, how could we have missed it?" Hannah had reached out, taking her father's weathered hand in hers. "None of us saw it, Dad. Lydia was very good at hiding who she really was. But we know now, and we're going to help Ethan heal." Her friends had rallied around her, offering support in ways both big and small. Sarah, her best friend since college, had shown up one day with groceries and a determination to cook enough meals to stock Hannah's freezer for weeks. "You focus on Ethan," Sarah had insisted, shooing Hannah out of the kitchen. "I've got this." As the enticing aroma of Sarah's famous lasagna filled the house, Hannah had felt a wave of gratitude wash over her. She wasn't alone in this. She had a support system, people who loved her and Ethan, people who would stand by them through this difficult time. But not all reactions had been supportive. Hannah had been taken aback by the skepticism she encountered from some quarters. Linda, a neighbor whose daughter had occasionally played with Ethan, had cornered Hannah at the local supermarket one afternoon. "Are you sure you're not overreacting, dear?" Linda had asked, her voice dripping with faux concern. "Children can be so imaginative, you know. And Lydia always seemed like such a lovely woman." Hannah had felt her cheeks flush with anger, but she had taken a deep breath, reminding herself that she didn't owe anyone an explanation. "I appreciate your concern, Linda," she had replied coolly, "but I trust my son. Now, if you'll excuse me." As she had walked away, her shopping cart squeaking slightly, Hannah had felt a mix of frustration and resolve. She couldn't control what others thought or said, but she could control how she reacted. Her energy needed to be focused on Ethan, not on defending their truth to others. The professional ramifications of the situation had also begun to make themselves felt. Hannah had always prided herself on her ability to balance her high-powered career with motherhood, but now that balance felt impossible to maintain. She had taken an extended leave of absence from work, but she knew she couldn't stay away forever. One evening, after Ethan had gone to bed, Hannah sat at her desk staring at her laptop screen. An email from her boss, Jim, glowed in the dim light of her home office. "Hannah, I hope this email finds you and Ethan well. The team misses you, and we're all thinking of you during this difficult time. When you feel ready, I'd like to discuss your return to work and any accommodations we can make to help you transition back smoothly. Take care, Jim." Hannah felt a lump form in her throat as she read the email. Jim had been nothing but supportive, but the thought of returning to the fast-paced, high-pressure world of tech development filled her with anxiety. How could she focus on product launches and market strategies when her son needed her so desperately? She closed her laptop with a soft click, leaning back in her chair and closing her eyes. The silence of the house enveloped her, broken only by the soft whirring of the air conditioning and the distant sound of Ethan's gentle snores. In that quiet moment, Hannah allowed herself to feel the full weight of everything that had happened. The betrayal, the guilt, the fear, the uncertainty about the future. It all crashed over her like a tidal wave. For the first time since Lydia's departure, she let herself cry, really cry, her body shaking with silent sobs. But as the storm of emotions began to subside, Hannah felt something else rising within her, a steely determination. Yes, their lives had been upended. Yes, the road ahead was uncertain and fraught with challenges. But they would face it together, she and Ethan, hand in hand. She wiped her eyes and stood up, walking to Ethan's room. Quietly, she pushed open the door and gazed at her sleeping son. In the soft glow of his dinosaur nightlight, Ethan looked peaceful, one arm thrown above his head, the other clutching Mr. Scales. Hannah padded softly across the room and gently brushed a curl from Ethan's forehead. "I love you, my brave little man," she whispered. "We're going to be okay." As she turned to leave, her eye caught the jungle mural on the wall. The little green dinosaur that looked like Mr. Scales seemed to wink at her in the dim light. Hannah smiled, feeling a spark of hope ignite in her chest. Tomorrow was a new day, another step on their journey of healing, another opportunity to create happy memories and chase away the lingering shadows. It wouldn't be easy, but Hannah was ready for the challenge. As she closed Ethan's door and headed to her own room, Hannah felt a sense of peace settle over her. They had survived the storm, and now it was time to rebuild. Brick by brick, day by day, they would create a new life, one filled with love, trust, and the unbreakable bond between a mother and her son. The perfect suburban life she had once aspired to now seemed like a distant, hollow dream. In its place was something far more valuable, a deep, abiding love, and a determination to protect and nurture the most precious thing in her world. Hannah smiled to herself as she crawled into bed. It wasn't the life she had planned, but it was real, it was theirs, and it was beautiful in its own way. As she drifted off to sleep, Hannah's last thought was of Ethan's bright smile earlier that day as he played with his dinosaurs. That smile was worth more than any corner office or executive title. It was a promise of better days to come, a light guiding them towards a brighter future. The day Lydia left their lives forever was etched into Hannah's memory with crystal clarity. The slam of the front door as Lydia stormed out still echoed in her mind, a sound that marked the end of one chapter and the beginning of another. In the immediate aftermath, Hannah had been too focused on Ethan to give much thought to Lydia's fate. But as the days turned into weeks, she found herself wondering what had become of the woman who had been such an integral part of their lives for so long. It was Sarah who first brought news of Lydia, about a month after her departure. Hannah and Sarah were sitting in Hannah's kitchen, sipping coffee while Ethan napped upstairs. "I ran into Linda at the grocery store," Sarah said, a note of hesitation in her voice. She said Lydia's been trying to find work in the area. Hannah felt her grip tighten on her coffee mug, her knuckles turning white. "What? She's still here?" Sarah reached across the table, placing a comforting hand on Hannah's arm. "Apparently, she's been having trouble finding anyone to hire her. Word's gotten around about what happened." A mix of emotions swirled in Hannah's chest: anger, fear, and a small, shameful hint of satisfaction. She pushed the last feeling away, uncomfortable with the idea of taking pleasure in anyone's misfortune, even Lydia's. "I don't know how to feel about that," Hannah admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "Part of me is relieved that she won't be able to hurt any other children, but another part feels guilty." Sarah finished for her, understanding in her eyes. "Hannah, you have nothing to feel guilty about. Lydia made her choices. The consequences are hers to bear." Hannah nodded, but the unease lingered. She thought of Lydia, the woman who had once been a trusted part of their family, who had read bedtime stories to Ethan and baked his favorite cookies. How had that person and the monster who had terrorized her son coexisted in one body? "I just keep wondering if I could have done something differently," Hannah confessed, running a hand through her hair. "If I had been around more, if I had paid closer attention." Sarah leaned forward, her gaze intense. Stop right there. You can't torture yourself with what-ifs. You're an amazing mother, Hannah. You trusted someone who presented herself as trustworthy. The moment you discovered the truth, you took action to protect Ethan. That's what matters. Hannah felt tears prickling at the corners of her eyes. She blinked them away, offering Sarah a watery smile. Thank you. I don't know what I'd do without you. As Sarah pulled her into a hug, Hannah felt a wave of gratitude for her friend's unwavering support. But even as she drew comfort from Sarah's words, she couldn't shake the nagging doubts that plagued her. The news of Lydia's continued presence in the area spread quickly through their tight-knit community. Hannah found herself the subject of curious glances and hushed conversations wherever she went. Some, like Linda, still seemed skeptical of Hannah's claims, while others offered their support and sympathy. One sunny afternoon, as Hannah was pushing Ethan on the swings at the local park, she overheard a conversation between two mothers nearby. "Can you believe that Lydia woman is still hanging around?" one of them whispered, not quite quietly enough. "If I were her, I'd have left town by now." "I know," the other replied, shaking her head. "But did you hear? Apparently she's been telling people that it's all a misunderstanding, that Hannah overreacted to normal discipline." Hannah felt her blood run cold. She looked at Ethan, happily swinging back and forth, blissfully unaware of the adult conversations happening around him. The idea that Lydia was out there, potentially trying to minimize or deny what she had done, made Hannah's stomach churn. That night, after tucking Ethan into bed, Hannah found herself pacing in her home office, her mind racing. Should she take legal action against Lydia? Would that just prolong the drama and potentially force Ethan to relive his trauma? Or was she obligated to do everything in her power to ensure Lydia couldn't harm another child? She picked up her phone, her finger hovering over her lawyer's contact information. But something held her back. The thought of a prolonged legal battle, of having to recount every painful detail in a courtroom, of potentially subjecting Ethan to questioning, it was all too much. With a heavy sigh, Hannah set her phone down. For now, at least, she would focus on healing, her own and Ethan's. If Lydia made any moves to threaten that healing, then Hannah would reconsider her options. As the weeks passed, the whispers about Lydia gradually faded. Life in their suburban community moved on, finding new topics of gossip and speculation. But for Hannah and Ethan, the impact of Lydia's presence in their lives lingered. Ethan still had nightmares sometimes, waking up in tears and calling for his mother. Hannah would rush to his side, holding him close and whispering reassurances until he calmed down. But slowly, ever so slowly, the frequency of these episodes began to decrease. One night, as Hannah was reading Ethan his bedtime story, he suddenly looked up at her with his big green eyes. "Mommy," he said, his voice small but steady, "is Lydia ever coming back?" Hannah felt her heart clench. She set the book aside and pulled Ethan onto her lap, wrapping her arms around him. "No, sweetheart," she said firmly. "Lydia is never coming back. I promise you that." Ethan was quiet for a moment, seeming to process this information. Then he nodded, snuggling closer to Hannah. "Good," he murmured. "I like it better when it's just us." Hannah felt tears spring to her eyes as she hugged Ethan tighter. "Me too, baby," she whispered. "Me too." As Ethan drifted off to sleep that night, Hannah stood in the doorway of his room, watching the gentle rise and fall of his chest. She thought about Lydia, about the damage she had done and the long road of healing ahead. But looking at her sleeping son, Hannah felt a surge of determination. They had survived Lydia's betrayal. They had weathered the storm of gossip and speculation, and they would continue to move forward, day by day, building a life filled with love and trust. Lydia's departure had left a wound, but it was a wound that was slowly healing. In its place, Hannah and Ethan were forging a bond stronger than ever before. As Hannah quietly closed Ethan's door, she felt a sense of peace settle over her. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. The perfect suburban life she had once dreamed of had been shattered, but from its ruins, something far more precious had emerged, a deep, unshakable connection between mother and son, a love that could weather any storm. Hannah made her way to her own bedroom, feeling lighter than she had in weeks. Tomorrow was a new day, another opportunity to build the life they deserved, and she was ready for it, ready to embrace whatever the future might hold, with Ethan by her side. The gentle California sun streamed through the kitchen windows, casting a warm glow over Hannah and Ethan as they sat at the breakfast table. It was a Saturday morning, nearly 6 months since Lydia's departure, and the atmosphere in the house was noticeably lighter, filled with a sense of peace that had been absent for so long. Hannah watched with a smile as Ethan carefully spread strawberry jam on his toast, his tongue poking out slightly in concentration. These quiet moments of normalcy had become precious to her, each one a small victory in their journey of healing. "So, what do you want to do today, little man?" Hannah asked, taking a sip of her coffee. "We've got the whole day to ourselves." Ethan looked up, a smear of jam on his cheek. "Can we go to the park and maybe get ice cream after?" Hannah felt her heart swell with love. There was a time, not so long ago, when Ethan had been too afraid to suggest outings, worried about displeasing the adults in his life. Now he was slowly regaining his confidence, his natural exuberance returning bit by bit. "That sounds perfect," Hannah replied, reaching out to wipe the jam from his face. "And how about we invite Grandma and Grandpa to join us? We haven't seen them in a while." Ethan's face lit up at the suggestion. "Yes, can Grandpa bring his kite? The big blue one that looks like a dragon?" Hannah laughed, nodding. "I'm sure he'd be happy to. Why don't you give them a call after breakfast?" As Ethan cheerfully returned to his toast, Hannah found herself reflecting on the changes in their lives over the past months. The decision to step back from her high-powered career hadn't been easy, but it had been necessary. She had transitioned to a part-time consulting role, which allowed her the flexibility to be there for Ethan while still keeping her foot in the door of the tech world. The change had been financially challenging, but Hannah had quickly realized that the rewards far outweighed the sacrifices. Being present for moments like this, lazy Saturday mornings, impromptu park visits, bedtime stories that weren't rushed, was worth more than any salary or job title. After breakfast, Hannah watched fondly as Ethan carefully dialed his grandparents' number, his face scrunched up in concentration as he remembered the digits. Her parents had been an invaluable support system throughout this ordeal, stepping up to help in ways Hannah hadn't even known she needed. "Hi, Grandma!" Ethan's excited voice filled the kitchen. "Guess what? Mommy said we can go to the park today. Can you and Grandpa come? And can Grandpa bring his big dragon kite?" Hannah could hear her mother's warm laugh through the phone. "Of course, sweetheart. We'd love to join you. We'll be there in an hour, okay?" As Ethan chatted animatedly with his grandmother, filling her in on the latest adventures of his dinosaur toys, Hannah felt a wave of gratitude wash over her. The bond between Ethan and his grandparents had grown even stronger in the wake of the Lydia incident. Her parents had been there for countless therapy appointments, late-night phone calls when Hannah felt overwhelmed, and simple family dinners that helped restore a sense of normalcy to their lives. An hour later, they were all at the local park. The day was perfect. A light breeze rustling the leaves of the old oak trees, the sun warm but not oppressive. Hannah sat on a bench with her mother, watching as Ethan and her father worked together to get the massive blue dragon kite airborne. "He's looking so much better," her mother commented, her eyes fixed on her grandson's laughing face. "You both are." Hannah nodded, a lump forming in her throat. "It's been a long road," she admitted. "There are still tough days, but we're getting there." Her mother reached out, squeezing Hannah's hand. "You're doing an amazing job, sweetheart. I hope you know that." Hannah felt tears prick at her eyes, but for once, they were tears of relief, of gratitude. "Thanks, Mom. I couldn't have done it without you and Dad." Just then, a triumphant shout drew their attention. Ethan and Hannah's father had managed to get the kite aloft, its long blue tail streaming behind it as it soared into the sky. Ethan was jumping up and down with excitement, his small hand firmly grasping the kite string while his grandfather guided him. "Mommy, look!" Ethan called out, his face split by a wide grin. "We did it!" Hannah stood up, walking over to join them. She ruffled Ethan's hair affectionately. "I see, baby. It's flying so high." As they stood there, a family united, watching the dragon kite dance against the blue sky, Hannah felt a profound sense of peace settle over her. The past months had been challenging, filled with pain and uncertainty. But they had also brought her family closer together, strengthening bonds that had always been there but had perhaps been taken for granted. Later that afternoon, as promised, they stopped for ice cream. Sitting around a small table outside the ice cream parlor, with Ethan happily devouring a double scoop of chocolate chip, Hannah looked at her family. Her father was regaling Ethan with a story about his own childhood adventures, complete with animated gestures that had Ethan giggling. Her mother was watching them with a fond smile, occasionally chiming in to correct a detail in her husband's tale. This, Hannah realized, was what truly mattered. Not the big house in the suburbs, not the high-powered career, not the appearance of a perfect life. What mattered was this: love, laughter, the unbreakable bonds of family. As the sun began to set, casting a golden glow over the suburban landscape, they made their way back home. Ethan, tired out from the day's excitement, fell asleep in the car, his face peaceful and content. Hannah's parents stayed for dinner, a simple meal of homemade pizza that they all prepared together once Ethan woke up from his nap. The kitchen was filled with laughter and the warm aroma of melting cheese and herbs as they worked, Ethan proudly arranging pepperoni slices on his portion of the pizza. As they sat around the dinner table, Hannah looked at her son. Tomato sauce smeared on his chin, eyes bright with happiness, Ethan was a far cry from the frightened, withdrawn child he had been just months ago. He was healing, they both were, surrounded by the love and support of their family. After her parents left and Ethan was tucked into bed, his room now a safe haven filled with positive memories, Hannah stood in the quiet of the living room. The house that had once felt tainted by Lydia's presence had been reclaimed, filled now with new, joyful memories. She picked up a framed photo from the mantelpiece, a snapshot from their day at the park, Ethan's face split by a wide grin as he flew the kite with his grandfather. Hannah traced her son's smiling face with her finger, feeling a surge of love and protectiveness. The road ahead might still have its challenges, but Hannah knew they would face them together, strengthened by the bonds of family and the resilience they had discovered within themselves. As she placed the photo back on the mantelpiece, Hannah felt a sense of hope for the future. A future filled with more days like today, more laughter, more love. The perfect suburban life she had once strived for had been an illusion. What she had now was real, messy at times, challenging, but infinitely more valuable. It was a life built on trust, on healing, on the unbreakable connection between a mother and her son, supported by the love of family. As Hannah made her way to bed, she paused at Ethan's door, listening to his soft, steady breathing. "Sweet dreams, my brave boy," she whispered. "Mommy loves you." And in the quiet of the night, in a house now filled with love and healing, Hannah felt at peace. They had weathered the storm and emerged stronger. Whatever the future held, they would face it together, a family reconnected, resilient, and full of hope. The early morning sun peeked through the curtains, casting a warm glow across Hannah's bedroom. She stirred, slowly opening her eyes to the promise of a new day. For a moment she lay still, listening to the quiet of the house, broken only by the cheerful chirping of birds outside her window. It had been a year since Lydia's departure, a year of challenges, growth, and healing. As Hannah stretched and got out of bed, she marveled at how different her life looked now compared to what she had once thought was her perfect existence. She padded softly down the hallway, pausing at Ethan's door. Gently pushing it open, she peeked inside. Ethan was still fast asleep, his wild curls splayed across the pillow, one arm wrapped tightly around Mr. Scales. Hannah felt a surge of love so strong it almost took her breath away. This was what mattered. This quiet moment, watching her son sleep peacefully, free from the fears and anxieties that had plagued him for so long. It was worth more than any corner office or executive title she had once craved. As she made her way downstairs to start the coffee, Hannah's mind wandered to the journey they had been on. The past year had been one of profound change, not just for Ethan, but for her as well. She had taken a leap of faith, leaving her high-pressure job in the tech world to start her own consulting firm. It had been terrifying at first, stepping away from the security of a steady paycheck and the prestige of her former position. But it had also been liberating. Now she could set her own hours, choose her projects, and most importantly, be there for Ethan in a way she never could before. The decision had also led her down an unexpected path. Inspired by her own experiences, Hannah had started a support group for parents whose children had experienced trauma. What had begun as a small gathering in her living room had grown into a community-wide initiative, providing resources, counseling, and a safe space for families to heal together. As she sipped her coffee, Hannah glanced at the calendar hanging on the fridge. It was marked with Ethan's activities, soccer practice, play dates, therapy sessions that were now down to once a month. But it also held reminders of her own commitments, meetings with clients, support group sessions, and most excitingly, an upcoming speaking engagement at a conference on child safety and well-being. The sound of small feet padding down the stairs broke into her reverie. Moments later, a tousle-haired Ethan appeared in the kitchen doorway, rubbing sleep from his eyes. "Good morning, sunshine," Hannah said warmly, opening her arms. Ethan shuffled over, burying himself in her embrace. "Morning, Mommy," he mumbled into her robe. As Hannah held her son close, breathing in the sweet scent of his hair, she thought about how far they had come. Ethan still had his moments, occasional nightmares, times when he grew quiet and withdrawn, but they were becoming fewer and farther between. More often now, he was just a regular 7-year-old boy, full of energy and curiosity about the world around him. "What do you want for breakfast, little man?" Hannah asked, running her fingers through his unruly curls. Ethan pulled back, a mischievous grin spreading across his face. "Can we have pancakes with chocolate chips?" Hannah laughed. "Chocolate chip pancakes it is. Want to help me make them?" As they worked together in the kitchen, mixing batter and sprinkling in chocolate chips, Hannah marveled at the easy companionship they now shared. Ethan stood on a step stool next to her, his little tongue poking out in concentration as he carefully measured the ingredients. "Mommy," Ethan said suddenly, looking up at her with his big green eyes, "I'm really happy." Hannah felt her heart swell with emotion. "I'm really happy too, sweetheart," she replied, leaning down to kiss the top of his head. As the smell of cooking pancakes filled the kitchen, Hannah reflected on the unexpected gifts that had come from their ordeal. The trauma they had experienced had been painful, but it had also led to a deeper connection between them, a more authentic way of living, and a sense of purpose she had never known before. After breakfast, as Hannah was cleaning up the kitchen, her phone buzzed with a text message. It was from Sarah, asking if she and Ethan wanted to join her family for a picnic in the park later that day. Hannah smiled, remembering how Sarah had been there for her during the darkest days of the past year. "Hey, Ethan," she called out to her son, who was sprawled on the living room floor with his Legos. "How would you like to have a picnic with Aunt Sarah and Jack today?" Ethan's face lit up. "Yes? Can we bring the frisbee?" "Of course," Hannah replied, her heart warming at his enthusiasm. There was a time not so long ago when Ethan had been too anxious to want to leave the house. Now he embraced every new adventure with open arms. As they packed for the picnic, Hannah's mind wandered to the future. She thought about the speaking engagement coming up, where she would share their story with other parents and professionals. It was both terrifying and exhilarating to think about opening up about their experiences, but Hannah knew it was important. If their story could help even one family avoid the pain they had gone through, or find hope in their own healing journey, it would be worth it. The doorbell rang, interrupting her thoughts. Hannah opened the door to find her parents standing there, arms laden with bags. "Surprise!" her mother exclaimed, her face beaming. "We thought we'd drop by and bring some of Ethan's favorite cookies." "Grandma! Grandpa!" Ethan's excited shout preceded him as he raced to the door, throwing himself into his grandfather's arms. As Hannah watched her son chatting animatedly with his grandparents, she felt a wave of gratitude wash over her. The support of her family had been invaluable throughout their healing process. They had been there through the tears, the setbacks, and the small victories. Their love a constant anchor in the storm. "We're actually heading out for a picnic with Sarah and her family," Hannah explained, inviting her parents in. "Would you like to join us?" The enthusiastic response from both her parents and Ethan sealed the deal. As they all piled into cars, picnic supplies overflowing and laughter filling the air, Hannah felt a sense of contentment settle over her. This was not the life she had envisioned for herself a year ago. It was messier, less structured, and far from the picture-perfect suburban existence she had once prized. But it was real, it was joyful, and it was theirs. As they drove to the park, Ethan's excited chatter filling the car, Hannah caught her reflection in the rearview mirror. The woman looking back at her was different from the polished executive of a year ago. There were a few more lines around her eyes, testament to the worries and sleepless nights of the past year. But there was also a depth, a strength, and a joy that hadn't been there before. She thought about the future stretching out before them. There would undoubtedly be more challenges to face, more obstacles to overcome. But Hannah knew now that they could weather any storm as long as they faced it together. The perfect suburban life she had once aspired to now seemed like a distant, hollow dream. In its place was something far more valuable, a life filled with genuine connections, purposeful work, and the unbreakable bond between a mother and her son. As they pulled into the park, the sun high in the sky and the promise of a beautiful day ahead, Hannah felt a surge of hope for the future. Whatever it might hold, she and Ethan would face it together, stronger for what they had overcome, and surrounded by the love of family and friends. Ethan's hand slipped into hers as they walked towards the picnic area, where Sarah and her family were already setting up. "I love you, Mommy," he said, looking up at her with a smile that could light up the darkest night. "I love you too, my brave boy," Hannah replied, squeezing his hand. "More than you'll ever know." And as they joined their extended family and friends, laughter and joy filling the air around them, Hannah knew that this messy, beautiful, real life was better than perfect. It was theirs, hard-won and precious, full of love, healing, and hope for the future.